Chapter 5. Hi everybody. Here's a little tune I call All the Ways I Suck. The Legion sentries spotted us from a long way off, as Legion sentries were supposed to do. By the time our small band arrived at the fort's main gates, a crowd had gathered. Demigods lined either side of the streets and watched in curious silence as we carried Jason's coffin through the camp. No one questioned us. No one tried to stop us. The weight of all those eyes were oppressive. Hazel led us straight down the Via Pretoria. Some legionnaires stood on the porches of their barracks, their half-polished armor temporarily forgotten, guitars set aside, and card games unfinished. Glowing purple Lars, the house gods of the Legion, milled about, drifting through walls or people with little regard for personal space. Giant eagles whirled overhead, eyeing us like potentially tasty rodents. I began to realize how sparse the crowd was. The camp seemed not deserted exactly, but only half full. A few young heroes walked on crutches. Others had arms in casts. Perhaps some of them were just in their barracks or in a sick bay or on an extended march, but I didn't like the haunted, grief-stricken expressions of the legionnaires who watched us. I remembered the gloating words of the Enojoy at Lake Temescal. I have already tasted the flesh of your comrades. At the blood moon, you will join them. I wasn't sure what a blood moon was. Lunar things were more my sister's department, but I didn't like the sound of it. I'd had quite enough blood from the looks of the legionnaires, so had they. When I thought about something else the ghoul had said, you would all join the king's dead, I thought about the words of the prophecy we'd received in the burning maze, and a troubling realization started to form in my head. I did my best to suppress. I'd already had my full day's quota of terror. We passed the storefronts of merchants who were allowed to operate inside the fort's walls. Only the most essential services, like a chariot dealership, an armory, a gladiator supply store, and a coffee bar. In front of the coffee place stood a two-headed barista, glowering at us with both faces, his green apron stained from latte foam. Finally, we reached the main intersection, where two roads came to a T in front of the Principia. On the steps of the gleaming white headquarters building, the Legion's praetors waited for us. I almost didn't recognize Frank John. The first time I seen him, back when I was a god and he was a Legion newbie, Frank had been a baby-faced, heavy-set boy with dark, flat-top hair and an adorable fixation on archery. He'd had this idea that I might be his father. He prayed to me all the time. Honestly, he was so cute I would have been happy to adopt him, but alas, he was on Mars. Second time I saw Frank, during his voyage on the Argo II, he'd had a growth sprout, or a magical testosterone injection or something. He'd grown taller, stronger, more imposing, though still in an adorable, cuddly, grizzly bear sort of way. Now, as I'd often noticed happening with young men still coming into their own, Frank's weight had begun to catch up to his growth spurt. He was once again a girthy big girthy guy with baby cheeks you just wanted to pinch. Only now he was larger and more muscular. He'd apparently fallen out of bed and scrambled to meet us, despite it being just early in the evening. His hair stuck up on top like a breaking wave. One of his jean cuffs was tucked into his sock. His top was a yellow silk nightshirt decorated with eagles and bears, a fashion statement he was doing his best to cover with his purple praetor's cloak. One thing that hadn't changed was his bearing, that slightly awkward stance, that faint, perplexed frown. as if he was constantly thinking, am I supposed to be here? That feeling was understandable. Frank had climbed the ranks from probatio to centurion to praetor in record time. Not since Julius Caesar had in a Roman officer risen so rapidly and brightly. That wasn't a comparison I would have shared with Frank, though, given what happened to my man Julius. My gaze drifted to the young woman at Frank's side, Praetor Reina Avila Ramirez Arellano, and I remembered. A bowling ball of panic formed in my heart and rolled into my lower intestines. It was a good thing I wasn't carrying Jason's coffin, or I would have dropped it. How can I explain this to you? Have you ever had an experience so painful or embarrassing you literally forgot it happened? Your mind disassociates, scuttles away from the instant, yelling, nope, 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 and refuses to acknowledge that memory ever again? That was me with Reina Avila Ramirez Arellano. Oh yes, I knew who she was. I was familiar with her name and reputation. I was fully aware we were destined to run into her at Camp Jupiter. The prophecy we deciphered in the burning maze had told me as much, but my fuzzy mortal brain had completely refused to make the most important connection: that this Reina was that Reina, the one whose face I had been shown long ago by a certain annoying goddess of love. That's her! My brain screamed at me as I stood before her in my flabby and acne spotted glory, clutching a bloody dress to my gut. Oh wow, she's beautiful. Now you recognize her? I mentally screamed back. Now you want to talk to her? Can you can you please forget that again? But like, remember what Venus said? My brain insisted. You're supposed to stay away from Reina, or yes, I remember. Shut up. You have conversations with this like this with your brain, don't you? It's completely normal, right? Reina was indeed beautiful and imposing. Her imperial gold armor was cloaked in a mantle of purple. Military medals twinkled on her chest. Her dark ponytail swept over her shoulder like a horsewhip, and her obsidian eyes were every bit as piercing as those of the eagle that circled above us. I managed to wrest my eyes from her. My face burned with humiliation. I could still hear the other gods laughing after Venus made her proclamation to me. Her dire warnings that if I should ever dare, ding, Lavinia's ballista chose that moment to crank itself another half notch, mercifully diverting everyone's attention to her. So, she stammered, we were on Dewey when I saw this hearse go flying over the guardrail. Rena raised her hand for silence. Centurion Levesky. Hazel's tone was guarded and wary, as if we weren't the first patterned procession who took a coffin into camp. Your report, please. Hazel glanced at the other pallbearers. Together, they gently lowered the casket. Traitors, Hazel said. We rescued these travelers at the borders of camp. This is Meg. Hi, said Meg. Is there a bathroom? I need to pee. Hazel looked flustered. In a sec, Meg. And this. She hesitated, as if she couldn't believe what she was about to say. This is Apollo. The crowd murmured uneasily. I caught snatches of their conversations. Did she say? No, actually, dude, obviously not named after in his dreams. Settle down, Frank John ordered, pulling his purple mantle tighter around his chamois top. He studied me, perhaps looking for any sign that I was in fact Apollo, the god he'd always admired. He blinked as if the concept had short-circuited his mind. Hazel, can you explain that? He pleaded. In the coffin? Hazel locked her golden eyes on me, giving me a silent command. Tell them. I didn't know how to start. I was not a great orator like Julius or Cicero. I wasn't a weaver of tall tales like Hermes. boy, that guy can tell some whoopers. How could I explain the many months of horrifying experience that had led to Meg and me standing here with the body of our heroic friend? I looked down at my ukulele. I thought of Piper McLean aboard Caligula's yachts, how she burst into singing Life of Illusions in the midst of a gang of hardened mercenaries. She had rendered them helpless, entranced by her serenade about melancholy and regret. I wasn't a charm speaker like Piper, but I was a musician, and surely Jason deserved a tribute. After what had happened with the Enojoy, I felt skittish of my ukulele, so I began to sing a cappella. After the first few bars, my voice quivered. I had no idea what I was doing. The words simply billowed up from deep inside me like the clouds of debris from Hazel's collapsed tunnel. I sang of my fall from Olympus, how I had landed in New York and became bound to McCaffrey. I sang of our time in Camp Half-Blood, where we discovered the triumvirate plot to control the great oracles and thus the future of the world. I sang of Meg's childhood, her terrible years of mental abuse in the household of Nero, and how we'd finally driven that emperor from the grove of Dodona. I sang of our battle against Commodus at the way station in Indianapolis, of our heroic journey into Caligula's burning maze to free the symbol of Erythraia. After each verse, I sang a refrain about Jason, his final stand, his final stand on Caligula's yacht, courageously facing death so that we could survive and continue our quest. Everything we had been through led to Jason's sacrifice. Everything that might come next, if we were lucky enough to defeat the Triumvirate and Python at Delphi, would be possible because of him. The song wasn't about me at all. I know, I couldn't hardly believe it either. It was the fall of Jason Grace. In the last verses, I sang of Jason's dreams for Temple Hill, his plans to add shrines until every god and goddess, no matter how obscure, was properly honored. I took the diorama from Meg, lifted it to show the assembled demigods, then set it on Jason's coffin like a soldier's flag. I'm not sure how long I sang. When I finished the last line, the sky was fully dark. My throat felt as hot and dry as a spent bullet cartridge. The giant eagles had gathered on nearby treetops. They stared at me with something like respect. The legionnaires' faces were streaked with tears. Some sniffled and wiped their noses. Others embraced and wept silently. I realized they weren't just grieving for Jason. The song had unleashed their collective sorrow about the recent battles, their losses, which, given the sparseness of the crowd, must have been extreme. Jason's song became their song. By honoring him, we honored all the fallen. On the steps of the Principia, the praetors stirred from their private anguish. Rena took a long, shaky breath. She exchanged a look with Frank, who was having difficulty controlling the tremble of his lower lip. The two leaders seemed to come to silent agreement. We will have a state funeral, Rena announced, and we'll realize Jason's dream, Frank added. Those temples and everything. His voice caught on Jason's name. He needed a count of 5 seconds to compose it. Everything he envisioned. We all built it all in 1 weekend. I could hardly feel the mood of the crowd change as palpably as a wonderfront. Their grief hardened into steely determination. Some nodded and muttered assent. A few shouted, "Ah, Ave, hail!" The rest of the crowd picked up the chant. Javelins pounded against shields. No one balked at the idea of rebuilding Temple Hill in a weekend. A task like that would have been impossible even for the most skilled engineer corps. But this was the Roman legion. Apollo and Meg will be guests of Camp Jupiter, Lena said. We will find them a place to stay. In the bathroom, Meg pleaded, dancing with her knees crossed. Rena managed a faint smile. Of course. Together we'll mourn and honor our dead. Afterward, we will discover our plan of war. The legionnaires cheered and banged their shields. I opened my mouth to say something eloquent to thank Rena and Frank for their hospitality, but all my remaining energy had been expended on my song. My gut was burned. My head twirled on my neck like a carousel. I fell face first and bit the dirt.